Hello, I'm Tom Carnell. Welcome to Friday's show. It is a wet and windy day here in Bellingham, Washington, so that's kind of what the ambient lighting is all about. Word of introduction, I was a jazz new age soundtrack sold and import buyer for Tower Records, Record Factory, and The Warehouse for about 2 decades. I published Carpet Noctem magazine and wrote most of it in the 90s. I wrote for Fangoria and Dread Central for about 20 years, give or take. I was a podcaster for a long time, and now I am an author. You can check out all of my 11 books over at Amazon or wherever you buy your reading stuff. And also, before I get started, checking in the description for this video, you will find links to all of the records and a majority of a lot of the other stuff I'm going to talk about. This video is made with no cuts, no edits, no AI, just a stream of consciousness, and with a few notes to keep me on track. We're going to begin, as usual, with some top 5 movie recommendations. Much like in the last show, I talked a little bit about a Serbian film. Today, I'm going to talk about a 1994 film it's available in a 2-pack. It looks like this. It's Nacho Cerda's Aftermath, again made in 1994, and then Genesis, made in 1998. You can find both films on YouTube. Genesis is a wonderful film, a beautiful film. Aftermath gets a little rough around the edges, so be warned about that. I have an interview with the director Nacho Cerda in the Carpet Noctem Interviews Volume 2. It's available on Amazon for 99 cents. There are 3 volumes of that. They kind of collect a lot of the interesting interviews that I did during that time with Carpet Noctem. The film is Genesis. Let's start there. Genesis is about a man who's lost his wife, and he is a sculptor, and he keeps sculpting image after image after image of her. And at one point, he is chipping away, and it cracks. And underneath the stone, he sees skin. So as the film develops, and it's fairly short, it's about 20 minutes. As the film develops, he starts to notice that his hands are getting firmer and firmer and harder to move, and they're being blackened. And so you get the impression that he's now turning to stone as the statue of his wife is going from stone to flesh. And just a beautiful film. Aftermath, completely different. Aftermath has to do with an autopsy surgeon whose interests don't exactly align with the Hippocratic Oath. It's rough. There are moments of that film that are jaw-dropping. I do recommend it because it, much like a Serbian film, it really hits hard, and the graphics are amazing. Mostly, at that point, it was all practical effects, and it's really something else. The next film after that is from 2006. It's Zhang Yimou's Curse of the Golden Flower. It's an epic wuxia, if you know what a wuxia is, Chinese drama. Lots of palace intrigue, lots of plotting. It is beautiful. You could easily clip random frames from that film and put it up on your wall as art. It is absolutely stunning. Zhang Yimou, remember, directed things like Hero, House of Flying Daggers, Raise the Red Lantern, and the film stars Chow Yun-fat and Gong Li. Let's see, after that, The Red Violin. Another beautiful film. It's from 1998. You can as that last time I checked, you can see it on Tubi, and that's worth doing. Directed by Francois Girard and starring people like Samuel L. Jackson and Jason Fleming. It has to do with a red violin, and you just sort of follow this violin through 3 centuries, through several owners, through different countries. And the ending on that is something else. I spoke about the British Film Institute doing 100 movies for 100 years. And as a part of that, not only did I see Follow the House of the Usher, which again, I highly recommend, but I also saw a 1926 version of Faust, F.W. Murnau, the guy who did Nosferatu. A version of Faust. Again, 1926, and the imagery is staggering, especially when you think about the fact that it's 1926. Tells the tale that we all have heard of, the classic tale of Faust. The acting is a little stagey because we're just making the inroads into cinema. But boy, it is really, really something. And again, it's on YouTube. It's fairly short, so I highly recommend that. Let's see. Last film. This is kind of an odd one. PMAC, When Zombies Attack. This was the result. This was something that the directors, Matt Rose and Chad Waters, who used to work for Rick Baker and Stan Winston. This was my first writing assignment for Fangoria. It has to do, if I'm going to pitch this to you, I'm going to say it's Cops, an episode of Cops, where the cops go out and find zombies who have fallen into the hot tub, who are bothering people in their houses. It features the late, great Bernie Wrightson in a role that duplicates one of his famous paintings, and it is phenomenal. It's a super fun, super inventive. The premise sort of carries the film, and the film is fairly short. It's like 15-20 minutes. You can find that also on YouTube. But yeah, good stuff. The makeup is great, of course, because of who they work for. The pacing is good. Characters are great, and it doesn't fool around. It's like, let's get going. Here's the premise. Good, you got it. Off we go. Moving on to books. I'm still reading Mo Hader's The Devil of Nanking. I'm kind of 50-50 on it. There are two stories involved, one about a young girl who is working as a hostess in Tokyo, and then the other one is sort of a diary entry from someone during the siege of Nanking. The diary aspect is very, very interesting because I had not read too much about Nanking. I was familiar with what happened there, but this is sort of on the ground kind of impressions. The story about the hostess, I'm hoping kind of will dovetail in at the end, but right now I kind of don't care. None of the people are particularly likable, but we proceed. Gonna recommend a couple more as we move along here. Stephen Pressfield's Gates of Fire. It's the tale of the Battle of Thermopylae, which was detailed in the movie and the comic 300. It's the Spartans versus the Persians. It is one of my favorite books. It really puts you on the ground. There are moments where they talk about being on the dance floor, which is where all the battle is taking place, standing thigh deep in mud. And then the reader sort of realizes that it hasn't rained in a good long time, and that they are, in fact, the mud is being wetted with blood, and it is phenomenal. It's just one of those books. All of Pressfield's historical fiction books are great. He's got a couple of modern stuff, and he has these self-help books. A great one is called The War of Art. It talks about procrastination and artists getting off their butts and doing the work. And that's something else. Another book, George R.R. Martin's Fever Dream. This is one of the best vampire novels I've ever read. I hear Guillermo del Toro is being talked to about directing this, which would be amazing. Has to do with as the sun was setting on the days of the Mississippi riverboats, a dark and mysterious stranger approaches this Captain Marsh, who had a boat and it caught fire, and now he's kind of listless and doesn't know what he's doing, what he's doing with his life. But this vampire, who he doesn't know is a vampire, says, "I'll pay for another boat. It'll be the most beautiful thing ever on the water." and we will sail up and down the river, and we will have a great time. He's trying to fight the addiction of vampirism with the special cocktail that he's made, and you get a real sense of that. And then, of course, there is a antagonist, the bad vampire and the bad people, vampires that he hangs out with. It's a beautiful book. It's George R. R. Martin, so of course it's well written, and yeah, good stuff. I mentioned before Ron Curry's The Savage Noble Death of Babs Dione. I understand he's doing a prequel, which is good news for me. I love this book. It's a female-led Sopranos kind of a thing. Babs is a badass who, not in the sense of like a Jason Statham kind of a thing, but she's just more of a Tony Sopranos kind of a thing. Very strong-willed, she runs stuff in that town, and it's really great. I'd love to see it as a film, but we'll see if that happens. And then finally, another all-time favorite book, Eiji Yoshikawa's Musashi. It's the tale of Miyamoto Musashi. It was made into a series of films that you can get in this lovely little box set. It's called the Samurai Trilogy. It stars Toshiro Mifune. The films are Samurai 1, Musashi and Miyamoto in 1954. Samurai 2, Duel at Ichoji Temple in 1955. And then it wraps up with Samurai 3, Duel at Ganru Island. And it's the tale of Miyamoto Musashi, directed by Hiroshi Inagaki. Beautiful. It's the 50s, so the violence isn't over the top, but it's just a great series of movies, and a great book. If it seems trite when people say, this book changed my life. This book changed my life. That, and they mention a monk named Taquan who has a great book also called The Unfettered Mind, which I kind of highly recommend as well. Rounding up with some music. We're going to start with Formula 3. They have a record called La Grande Casa from 1973. It's their fourth record by this Italian pop rock band, which is kind of an unfair description. It's not exactly prog, but it's definitely not pop. Good stuff, enjoyable. Not only is it something you can put on in the background, but you can also actively listen to. Following that, Sean Wolcott, a Seattle-based musician. It's his 12th record. It's called Crystal Eyes Stalk at Midnight, and it's a very giallo title. And I'm thinking about doing an entire giallo show at some point. Not only a bunch of giallo movies, but also a lot of giallo music. It leans heavily on the Italian, French library music and soundtrack tradition. It sounds like things like Goblin, if you're a fan of Goblin and all of their music, and then the great Italian prog band Banco del Mutuo Soccorso. Good stuff there. Up next, Pepe Maina, Echoes from a Distant Land, 2023. Maina was born in Milan. This music is great. It's very similar to things like Mike Oldfield, Jade Warrior, Clearlight, and Clearlight Symphony, if any of those names are ringing a bell. Terrific. He has a newer record out that I've listened to, and it is also highly recommended. Following that, just a couple more here. Buckethead. If you're familiar with Buckethead, he's kind of a frenetic guitar player who wears a mask and a chicken bucket on his head. Who not only is one of the world's best guitarists, in my opinion, but he also has a record out called Colma. Colma is one of the most stunning records I've ever heard. It was made. He made it for his mother, who was going through stomach cancer treatments, and just for her to relax and be sort of contemplative about. I'm recommending not only Colma, but also his 2002 record called Electric Tears. Colma, I think, is a little bit better, but Electric Tears is right in that pocket. More pretty, more lovely than Look at Me Shred, which is great, but those two records are sort of anomalies in his career, but they're great stuff. A quick story time here. Back in the day, I was at a Los Angeles comic convention, which is a thing I don't know if they still do it, but they used to hold these every month. And vendors would come, collectors would come, and you would scour these boxes looking for this issue. I was there looking for Beautiful Stories for Ugly Children number 22, which I finally found. Met a guy, and we started talking, and I asked him his name, and he said it was Buckethead, and he didn't have his mask on, and so I was kind of weirded out about that. But we were looking through films, and at one point I knew from reading that he had a thing about mannequins. So I happened to come across a copy of the slasher film Tourist Trap, which heavily involves mannequins. And I pushed it on him. I'm like, you need to get this. And he's just like, I don't know. It's got mannequins, Buck. Mannequins. Bought it like that. Turns out he loved it. Years later, we were at San Diego Comic-Con with Carpe Noctem. We were at the late, great Alan Spiegel's table. If you don't know Alan was a guy who used to rep just a roster of killer artists, people like Dave McKean, John J. Muth, Tom Ang, Paul Lee. Going to his table was always a treat because you would see originals and of the kind that would just blow you away. So we're standing there talking for a long time. Buckethead shows up, and at one point he's got a concerned look on his face. And I'm like, hey man, like you look kind of weirded out, like what's going on? And I remember him sighing and just going, I think I just joined Guns N' Roses, which made me laugh. So there you go, that's my story. Next record, the James Hunter 6. The record is called Off the Fence from 2026. Very similar to things like Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings, Sugar Pie DeSanto, and the live records Paul Carrick of Squeeze did back in 2020. Like the world's greatest bar band. He is a British R&B soul Grammy-nominated artist. And yeah, Van Morrison's on the record. And it's just like, if you're sitting around having a beer with a couple of buddies, put that on and you will love it. Up next, Bubu. They've just re-released this record. It's called El Eco del Sol from 2018. South American, Argentinian progressive rock band. Very syncopated and fun. Similar to things like Crucis, if you know Crucis. Quella Vecchia Locanda, an Italian progressive rock band. And R.D. Misteri, another Italian rock band, which has one of the greatest drummers of all time. And then the great prog rock band Juzda Urfa, which I think are Siberian or Serbian, one of the two. Starts with an S. Great stuff. All of that is great stuff. But the new Bubu, the reissue Bubu El Eco del Sol is really terrific as well. Quite enjoyed that. Two more to go. Tim Wheater Heartland. This is another beautiful record. We interviewed, let me back up. He is one of the founding members of Eurythmics. This is his 14th release, and award-winning composer, flautist, vocalist, and performer. He was a protege of Jean-Pierre Rampal, if you know that guy, and James Galway, the two flautists. He speaks a lot on the healing power of music, and this record is definitely a part of that. There's a lot from Nostradamus and the quatrains in this as well, but it's one of those things where every time, I've heard it hundreds of times, and every time I hear it, you sort of feel yourself well up for some reason, like you're going to start weeping. And it's not just an anomaly that's indicative of me. It's more people I know who have heard it have come back with the same reaction. I had the honor of interviewing Tim for Carpe Noctem back in the 90s. And it was really interesting about the healing power of music and the effect that music can have on people. Tim Wheater, Heartland. And then the last one, oh no, I take it back. I have a couple more. Liniker. I was watching Amoeba Records, What's in My Bag recently, and they were the guest who was going through stuff. Brazilian singer-songwriter. Comparison to artists like Rita Lee and Tim Maya are out of the question. Very soulful, fascinating, and good stuff. Good stuff. It's a little more upbeat than some of these other things, but it's a great record, and I do recommend it. It's in Spanish or Portuguese, but don't let that scare you away. Now, two more. Louie Fitzgerald. The record is called East to West. It came out in 2025. Atmospheric piano-based jazz, lush and relaxing, perfect for putting on while you're having dinner, or just chilling out and reading, or just hanging out. Similar to bands like Eternal City and Garden Planet, if any of those ring a bell. Yeah, I love this record. I was expecting kind of a George Winston kind of thing, but no, this is something different. Not that those records aren't great and you should own them as well, but it just struck me that this was really something. And then finally, the Sorcerers, Other Worlds and Habits from 2025. They're from Leeds, but the music is very Ethiopian-inspired jazz, similar to things like Mulatu Astatke, if you're familiar with that. Very cool and funkily atmospheric. It's similar to bands like Surprise Chef and the Heliocentrics, if those are ringing a bell. Good stuff. I found myself listening to it and then hitting play again and listening to it again, and did that about 2 or 3 times. Great stuff. Which is that's an anomaly for me. I'm one of those guys who put the record on, listen to it, mark it off the list, moving on, because my to be heard pile is gigantic. Speaking of that, if you go over to my Facebook page, every Friday I put a graphic up of all the things that I've gotten my little mitts on, and it's like 100, 150, 200 records every week. So things I don't have time to talk about on this show. I'm going to try, but at a certain point, I worry that this stuff will become just a list, and no one likes that. But just know that it's every Friday. It's there. I'm transferring all my other my other content, like movie reviews, book reviews, record reviews, to this. So here is the only place you're going to get all that information. Just know that there is a lot of music out there, and just when you think that you're like, I know everything about music, you don't. Because what you can do is take a dart, throw it at a map of the world, and dive. I do deep dives all the time. I just did a dive the last few days into funk, deep funk, and the music of Vertigo Records, where I went to Wikipedia, pulled an entire discography from a record label, just went through, click. Have I heard of this? Yes. Have I not heard of this? Well, let's go change that and maybe add it to the pile, the Friday pile, or what have you. So that's that. That's going to be Friday. I'm going a little long here, but what are you going to do? Go over to my website at www.tomcarnell.com/KMRE. You will find 200 hours of a radio show, 1 hour long, that I did for a long time here in Bellingham for a local radio station. It's a lot of music, a lot of movie pulls, a lot of interview clips. I tried to make it fun. It was on Friday night at midnight, so that was kind of where my head was at. And while you're there, check out some of my books. They all have their own webpage. And please go to Amazon if you want. Most of the books are horror related. There's 3 novels, and a bunch of short story collection. And the short story collections are very, very, I try to be different. If the idea that I have seems familiar, it gets tabled for something that isn't as familiar. My latest book is Monolith Records. It is not horror. It is, as odd as this is going to sound, it's like a romantic comedy, romantic comedy set in 1985 in a record store very similar to Tower Records. Our hero gets hired, and in the course of about a year, he gets exposed to not only a ton of music, and, but also it molds him, changes his personality a little bit. He kind of becomes a dick at one point. But he also meets the woman who becomes his wife. I don't want to say that it is autobiographical, but it's kind of autobiographical. People who have read it that were there at the time said that it's exactly how it was. So if you like that, it's funny, it's poignant, it's a lot of music gets mentioned. A little of it is inside baseball. Like if you've ever worked in record stores, you're going to recognize a lot of the characters and a lot of the customers. What's the line from Clerks? This job would be great if it wasn't for the fucking customers. So there you go. And that's going to do it. So please like and subscribe to the video, comment if you can. Let me know what you want to hear. If there's a particular record you want to know my thoughts on. And let me know if those kind of themed shows are something you'd like to see, like the Giallo show, or horror film soundtracks, or jazz, or like even new age. I've heard just about everything out there. I just fell into a hole of Serbian surf music, so there's that. So that's going to do it. I hope your weekend is fine. I hope you guys are all out there being safe. And yeah, we'll see you on Monday. Thanks. See you later. Bye.